What? What did you just do? Pervert. Molester. She screamed and began sobbing uncontrollably, turning her back on me to hide her exposed chest. I tried to explain that I had only administered first aid after she collapsed, but she refused to listen. Before long, an ambulance arrived, and she was taken to the hospital. With red, swollen eyes, she shot me a sharp glare. Just wait. I'm telling my dad about this. I stood there in a daze, watching as the ambulance drove away. Suddenly, I remembered I had a job interview later. Panicking, I checked the time, only to realize I was already way past the appointment. A woman collapsed on the sidewalk. Because I helped her, I ended up missing my interview. But even so, someone reached out to save me. My name is Steve. I'm currently in the middle of job hunting. Today, I had an interview with Moonlight Travel Agency. I used to work for a trading company. It wasn't related to the travel industry, but my job took me all over the world. During my downtime, I enjoyed visiting famous local spots, eating at renowned restaurants, and connecting with the locals. I wanted to work in a job where I could use those experiences. Moonlight Travel Agency is a small company, but their slogan, "Experience the world's most breathtaking views while you're alive," really resonated with me. Their customer reviews are great too. I'm sure the company will grow. I want to be a part of that. As soon as I stepped out of the station, the pedestrian traffic lights at the crosswalk in front of me started blinking green. I arrived 30 minutes early for the interview, so I had plenty of time. Everything's fine. I calmed my slightly jittery legs and waited for the traffic lights to turn green. Just then, a man in a suit rushed past me, looking panicked. The pedestrian traffic lights had already turned red, and cars were starting to move. Danger! Before I could even shout, the man was hit by a car. A scream echoed from a woman. The man, who had been driving the car, rushed over to the man who was lying on the road. "Someone call an ambulance," he shouted, so I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed 911. One of the women waiting at the traffic lights called out, "I'm a nurse," and rushed to the injured man. Watching her take charge so confidently gave me a sense of relief. But then, I heard a loud thud behind me. Turning around, I saw a woman lying on the sidewalk. Her sunflower-patterned skirt caught the light. But it wasn't the time to think about that right now. Onlookers started murmuring, "What's going on?" but no one moved to help her, just furrowing their brows in confusion. Some people were even walking away, leaving her behind. Pushing past those indifferent people, I rushed over to her. I checked her for breathing. No breathing. No pulse either. "Excuse me, the lady with the pink hair. Could you run to the convenience store and grab an AED?" "Me?" The college-aged girl I pointed at yelped but quickly dashed toward the store. While waiting, I moved the woman to a safer spot at the edge of the sidewalk and began chest compressions. It was my first time performing first CPR. I had only practiced it a few times in training sessions. I vaguely remembered the instructor saying, "It's okay if you break a rib, just press hard." Feeling nervous about whether I was doing it right, I followed what I had learned. As I continued, the pink-haired girl returned. I checked the woman's breathing and pulse, still nothing. "I'm going to use the AED, please step back." The girl who had brought the AED quickly jumped away. Everyone else had already left, as if they thought they no longer had a part to play. I opened the AED and turned it on. Following the voice instructions, I pulled out the electrode pads. When it instructed me to attach the pads to her body, I hesitated for a moment. Excuse me, could you help me place these on her?" I asked the pink-haired girl, but she shook her head frantically. No way, I can't. There was no time to hesitate. This was a life-or-death situation. I remembered that you didn't have to remove all the clothes as long as the pads were applied to bare skin. I unbuttoned just a bit of her pale green blouse and tried to place the pad on the upper right side of her chest. At that moment, my eyes widened in shock. There was a large scar across her chest. Was it from an accident? Realizing I had paused, I shook my head and quickly resumed the procedure. I placed the other pad below her left chest, and the AED determined that a shock was needed, so I pressed the button. It instructed me to resume chest compressions, and I followed the instructions. As they repeated it a few times, she groaned and started coughing. Thank goodness, she's alive. Relief washed over me, and I sank to the ground. The woman winced and opened her eyes. When she tried to sit up, she seemed to notice her open blouse and gasped, covering herself hurriedly. Then, she glared at me. What did you do to me? Pervert. Molester. Wait, you collapsed, and Don't look at me. She turned away, sobbing uncontrollably. Quickly fastening the buttons of her blouse, she stood up. But she seemed to feel faint, and her body swayed. I instinctively reached out to support her. But the next moment, her hand came flying toward my left cheek in a sharp slap. Don't touch me. Just then, the ambulance arrived. They were already loading the man who had been hit by the car onto a stretcher. Over here. This girl collapsed too, but she just regained consciousness. The woman who had brought the AED called out to the paramedics. One person rushed over, asking, "Are you okay?" and glanced at the AED spread out on the ground. "Are you okay? Please come with us. We'll check you over just to be sure." The woman nodded quietly, but before getting into the ambulance, she shot me a piercing glare with her tear-streaked, red eyes. "Just wait. I'm telling my dad about this." I stood there in shock as I watched the ambulance drive away. Suddenly, I remembered my interview. Panicking, I checked the time, only to find that the appointment time had long passed. I rushed to the Moonlight travel agency building, but I was turned away at the door with a firm, "Lateness is unacceptable." Needless to say, I later received a rejection letter from them. A few days after receiving the rejection letter from Moonlight Travel Agency, I tried to move on and continue my job search. What's done is done. It's important to move forward. Today, I didn't have any interviews lined up. I decided to visit the job center for some career advice and stepped out of my apartment. Just then, a sleek, black car, clearly expensive at first glance, came to a silent stop in front of the apartment. That car felt completely out of place in front of this apartment, where the rent was only a few $100s a month. Was one of the residents related to someone wealthy? I'd never heard anything like that. As I pondered, a man stepped out of the car. When I recognized his face, my eyes widened in shock. It was Mr. Adams, the CEO of Moonlight Travel Agency. I had seen his picture on the company's website many times. Then, to my even greater surprise, a woman stepped out of the car after him. She was the very same woman I had saved on the day of my missed interview, wearing a yellow cardigan this time. Could she be an employee of Moonlight Travel Agency too? As I stared at them in disbelief, the woman's eyes met mine. "Oh, Dad, that's him," she murmured, looking away awkwardly as she tugged at Mr. Adams's sleeve. "You're the one who saved Hannah." Mr. Adams rushed toward me with his arms wide open. He grabbed my hand and shook it vigorously up and down. As I stood there, dumbfounded, he pulled a business card from the inside pocket of his jacket. I'm David Adams, the CEO of Moonlight Travel Agency. I heard that you saved my daughter's life the other day. I can't thank you enough." He bowed his head deeply, then shot a stern look at Hannah. Hannah bit her lip before bowing her head as well. "I'm so sorry for calling you names and accusing you of being a pervert back then. You saved my life, and I didn't even thank you." In the ambulance, after I explained everything, the paramedics scolded me. They said I might not have woken up if it weren't for you. Looking into Hannah's eyes as she glanced up at me cautiously, I could tell she truly felt sorry. "I'm just glad you understand. Thank you for coming all this way to apologize and express your gratitude." No, Mr. Adams said, "visiting the person who saved my daughter's life is the least I could do. Besides, I have something to ask you. You had an interview scheduled with my company that day, didn't you?" "Yes, I did. Are you still job hunting? Or have you found a position somewhere else?" "No, I'm still looking." "That's fortunate for us, then. Steve, if you're willing, I would like to offer you a job at my company." "Wait, what?" It felt as if a path that had been closed off had suddenly opened right before me. I've heard that when Hannah collapsed, many people just walked by and ignored her. But you were the one who rushed to her aid. Someone with that sense of justice, who can remain calm in a crisis, is exactly the kind of person we need. Please consider joining us. Please, I'm asking as well. It's my fault you missed your interview." With both of them bowing their heads to me, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. I've actually really wanted to join your company. So, I'd be thrilled if you would hire me. Please, I look forward to working with you." "Is that so?" "Thank you, Steve. We look forward to working with you too." I firmly shook the hand Mr. Adams offered. Beside us, Hannah let out a small sigh of relief. And so, a month passed since I successfully joined Moonlight Travel Agency. As I arrived at the main office and was about to head up in the elevator, Hannah slipped in right behind me. "Good morning." "Good morning, Steve." No one else joined us, and the elevator quietly closed its doors and began to ascend. Being alone with Hannah made me feel a bit tense. After joining the company, I was assigned to the department where she served as the senior manager. So, we were headed to the same place. While I frantically searched for something to talk about, she broke the silence first. "Everyone's been talking about how quickly you're standing out in the department. The overseas travel plan, which had been stuck for a while, started moving smoothly as soon as you took over. We didn't have anyone knowledgeable about foreign affairs or languages before you. I'm glad my previous job experience is coming in handy. If we can also attract more customers from abroad to visit the US, our sales will definitely increase. You're really dependable." Hannah's smile made my heart skip a beat. She was like a sunflower, bright and cheerful, with a personality that lit up the room. Her presence alone seemed to make everything around her feel lighter. The impression I had of her from our first meeting was completely different now. While I was lost in admiration, the elevator doors opened. I regretted that our conversation had to end, but Hannah didn't seem to think twice as she quickly stepped out. "Good morning, Hannah." Several senior male colleagues hurried over to greet her as soon as they saw her. Hannah responded with a warm smile and a good morning. The senior colleagues, after discreetly pumping their fists with a quiet yes. I got to greet Hannah again today, began preparing to head out for their fieldwork. I opened my laptop to check my emails before heading out myself. The senior female colleague called Laura, who sat next to me, stretched her arms lazily above her head. Ah, another day out in the field. I don't even like traveling. So I'm terrible at putting together plans for inns or recommending nearby attractions. Hey, Steve, can you go in my place? Hey, don't push your work onto the junior staff. Hannah's reprimand came swiftly, and the senior pouted in response. Oh, come on. This is all about putting the right person in the right job. Steve's better at this, and he'll create a plan that'll make the inns happier than anything I could do. If you keep piling your work on Steve, he'll get overwhelmed. I couldn't help but glance over at Hannah. She was staring at the senior with a firm, chastising look. The senior, looking disgruntled, noisily stood up from her chair. Yeah, I'll do it. Must be nice for you, though, being able to stay in the office all day as the department head. I noticed Hannah's eyes drop slightly at the comment. I frowned at Laura, who was still sulking. There were a few colleagues like her who were frustrated that Hannah only handled office work and rarely went out for field inspections or business trips. For some reason, it was an unspoken rule that Hannah stayed in the office most of the time. Laura, someone has to stay in the office in case of emergencies, right? That's why the department head stays behind. I guess that's true. Laura sighed, then turned to Hannah with a small bow. Sorry, I went too far. After her apology, she headed out of the office. It was about time for me to head out too, or I'd be late for my appointment. I shut down my computer and grabbed my bag. Thank you, Steve. Hannah's eyebrows were furrowed slightly, her expression a little downcast. It was nothing, really. I'll be back soon. I smiled, hoping to lift her spirits, and left the office. As I watched Hannah's shoulders slump, I couldn't help but feel a little concerned. Next week, we'll be going to Spring Rain Inn to preview their tour plan. Since it's a couple's plan, it will be 2 people, a man and a woman. So, it will be me and Steve. Hannah's announcement stirred up a buzz in the office, particularly among the male employees. You're lucky, Steve, getting to go to the hot springs with Hannah. And it's for the couple's plan? So you're going to have to act like a couple, right? Even if it's just pretend, getting to be Hannah's boyfriend? That's one hell of a perk. Although envious, my senior colleagues still cheered me on with comments like, "Good luck, and just don't overstep, alright?" It was comforting to know that everyone in the company was so supportive. But why Steve? He just started here, didn't he? Idiot, Steve's a workhorse. He's been killing it ever since he joined. Fair enough. But it's still rare for Hannah to go out in the field, right? This might be her first time, actually. Yeah, that's true. With that, the seniors returned to their desks. I couldn't help but feel puzzled myself. Why would they take the newest employee like me on my first field work assignment? And for a couple's plan, no less. Could it be that she thought I'd be fine pretending to be her boyfriend? Maybe she actually likes me? I let my imagination run wild, and before I knew it, I had made a mistake entering some data. Thankfully, it was an easy fix, but I mentally reminded myself to stay focused. Before I knew it, the day of the site inspection with Hannah arrived. Given the nature of the plan, we were staying over a weekend, when couples were most likely to visit. Most guests drove to Spring Rain Inn, so we were traveling by car. Naturally, I was the one driving. Hannah, sitting in the passenger seat, was unusually quiet. Normally bright and cheerful, today her face was tense, and her lips were pressed tightly together. She even looked a little pale. Are you alright? Are you feeling car sick? I asked, trying to stay calm despite my growing concern, although I had been driving as smoothly as possible. Hannah shook her head. I'm fine. You're a really good driver, Steve. Thank you. Do you mind if I hold on to something, just for a bit? Hold on to. Not your hand or anything, maybe just your, clothes. Just for a moment. Of course, go ahead. I smiled, glancing at her briefly, and saw her let out a small sigh of relief as she lightly pinched the hem of my shirt. Her expression softened, just a little. But she had started to say hand. Did she actually want to hold my hand? Could this mean she liked me? Was she trying to use this opportunity to get closer? As these thoughts filled my mind, my heart started pounding. I'm driving right now. I need to calm down. But now, I couldn't stop noticing the slight tug on my shirt. Even though she wasn't touching my skin. Battling a sweet tension, I somehow managed to drive safely and arrived at Spring Rain Inn. The landlady greeted us and led us to the room that had been prepared specifically for the couple's plan tour. Since it was a couple's plan, of course, we only had one room. I knew that, but still, the thought of being alone with Hannah made my heart race. I glanced at her, but she didn't seem the least bit concerned. Her eyes sparkled as she admired the room, saying, "Wow, what a lovely room." "This room comes with a private outdoor bath," the landlady explained. "Dinner will be served here in your room, so you can enjoy it at your leisure. And since this room is far from the other guest rooms, there's no need to worry about being disturbed, no matter what you do." Her knowing smile made my heart skip a beat. I forced a laugh, trying to hide the heat rising to my face. Well, we're just here for an inspection. We'll bring your dinner around 7, the landlady said, before leaving the room. Now, it was just the two of us. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside was the only thing breaking the silence that now filled the room. "All right, let's enjoy the outdoor bath," Hannah suddenly said, starting to undress. I panicked and quickly turned my back. "Wait. Don't just start undressing here. Use the changing area, please." Despite my protest, I could still hear the sound of clothes rustling. She was still undressing. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might explode. "Come on, Steve, hurry up and get undressed. We can't fully experience the couple's plan unless we do it together." Even though I heard her voice behind me, I couldn't move. "Steve?" My arm was suddenly yanked forcefully. Because it happened so suddenly, I couldn't help but turn around to face her. But she wasn't naked, she was wearing a swimsuit. A tank top and shorts. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I couldn't deny the slight hint of disappointment that lingered. With more of her skin exposed, my eyes naturally drifted to the scar on her chest. The same one I had seen when I saved her. Hannah seemed to be aware of my gaze, looking up at me with a tense expression. Her hand, still gripping my arm, tightened. I forced myself to look into her eyes. "So, you were wearing a swimsuit underneath. You should have said so earlier." "I didn't bring one, so go ahead without me. I'll join you after I change." She released her grip on my arm, still looking up at me. "All right. I'll go ahead, then." After making sure she'd gone out to the outdoor bath, I took out my swimsuit from my bag and changed. Then, I headed to the outdoor bath as well. I was still feeling tense, so I walked carefully, making sure not to slip. Quietly, I joined Hannah, who was already enjoying the outdoor bath. The bath was small, and unless I was careful to stay in the corner, my skin might brush against hers. The sound of rustling leaves and the gentle flow of the nearby river gradually eased my tension. The warm water soaking into my body helped too. This view is incredible. It really fits with our company's slogan. Experience the world's most breathtaking views while you're alive. But it seems a waste to limit it to couples. I think families could also enjoy this, especially parents with kids who might appreciate not having to worry if their children get too noisy. There was no reply. I turned to look at her and saw that she was gazing down, her hand gently touching the scar on her chest. I hesitated, unsure whether I should say something. "Why did you bring me along for this inspection?" "I'm still new in the company." Avoiding the topic of her scar, I brought up what I'd been wondering about ever since she'd chosen me. Hannah slowly raised her head. "Because I thought you'd be okay. I'm aware of the feelings some people have toward me. If I brought someone who liked me into this kind of situation, they might not be able to control themselves." Though she claimed to understand how others felt about her, she didn't seem to realize how I felt. Feeling a bit dejected, I pulled my knees up to my chest under the water. Even I'm holding myself back. In that moment, I truly wanted to reach out, extend a hand or foot, just to touch her. I could hear the chirping of birds from somewhere. As a distraction, I focused my attention on the sound. "You're not asking anything." I widened my eyes at the words that were quietly dropped. Hannah was once again touching the scar on her chest, and I realized that's what she meant. "You don't want to talk about it, right? So I won't ask." Everyone has something they'd rather keep to themselves. But, scar or not, you're still Hannah. You're the bright, incredible woman who always lights up the room, someone I really look up to. "I see." Her face flushed slightly. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I think I'll get out now." "Don't stay in too long, or you might get dizzy." I quietly slipped out of the outdoor bath. I dried off, changed into my gown, and, before leaving, glanced through the window to check on Hannah. She was hunched over, her shoulders trembling. Seeing that, I quietly left her alone. After enjoying the outdoor bath, we spent some time exploring the relaxation room and wandered around the nearby souvenir shops and tourist spots. Hannah seemed refreshed, taking photos and chatting with the shopkeepers. By the time we returned to our room just before 7, we were ready to indulge in the dinner that was brought to us. Once we had finished and I had summarized the day's events in the report, I closed my laptop. The day's work was officially done. "Good job, Steve. Here you go." Hannah, who had finished earlier, handed me a cup of the local sake. As I took a sip, the sharp, refreshing taste ran down my throat. For a while, we sat together in comfortable silence, enjoying the sake and some pickled snacks we had bought at a souvenir shop. Though we didn't talk much, the atmosphere felt peaceful and pleasant. "Hey, Steve, why did you leave your previous job?" "It was a trading company, right?" "You're so good at your job," Hannah asked, her face slightly flushed, possibly from the alcohol. I was feeling a bit tipsy too, and for the first time, I felt like sharing a story I usually kept to myself. Maybe it was because it was Hannah asking. My older brother had already joined the company before me. We were really close. So I thought it would be great to help him out by working at the same place. But, well, I ended up being better at the job than him. The CEO took a liking to me, and my brother didn't handle it well. He started using his position as my superior to make my life difficult, giving me extra work, blaming me for his mistakes. I figured he'd get over it eventually, and things would go back to normal. so I didn't let the others know what was happening. I think to them, I seemed to be doing just fine. But in the end, it got to me. On the day of a major business meeting, I came down with a fever. My brother told the CEO I was being irresponsible, and that was the end of it. I was forced to resign. The sip of alcohol I took now tasted bitter, unlike before. Since I left the company, I haven't seen my brother. I'm too scared to face him. Even someone who looks like they have it all together may be carrying their own scars. That's something I've learned from all this. And this is the first time I've ever told anyone about it. Hannah looked at me with sadness in her eyes. From the collar of her gown, I could see a small part of her scar peeking through. She gently placed her hand over it. Since you shared your secret with me, I guess I should tell you mine. You don't have to, you know. But Hannah shook her head. Her expression became resolute as she looked straight at me. It seemed the alcohol's effects had completely worn off. This scar, you see, was from an accident. A car accident. My parents, they loved traveling. They loved it so much that they even started a company like this. When I was little, I often traveled with them, riding in my dad's car, going to all sorts of places. When I was 12, we were headed on a trip to the hot springs, the three of us together in the car. But on the way, a truck driver who had fallen asleep at the wheel crashed into us, and my mom. Hannah clenched her hand over the scar, her head bowed. Even from where I was sitting, I could see her small frame trembling. The accident hadn't just left a physical scar on her body, it had left a deep wound on her heart. I realized then why she had looked so pale in the car earlier. She had wanted to hold my hand because she needed reassurance. Ever since then, I'd been terrified of traveling. I had originally planned to find a job somewhere else, but nothing worked out. So, in the end, my dad hired me at his company. He made sure I could stay in an office role, away from the travel side of things. He's overprotective like that. And I get why the other employees resent me. You've heard them, haven't you? I nodded slightly, and Hannah gave a self-deprecating laugh. I'm the daughter of a travel company founder, but I'm too scared to travel. I got this cushy position because of my dad's connections. And I don't do any field work. I've always known I couldn't keep going like this, but I couldn't take that first step. Then you saved me. When I collapsed that day, it was because the memories of the accident came flooding back. I was shocked when you saw my scar, and I said horrible things to you in my panic. But you forgave me. You didn't ask about the scar, and you stood up for me when others spoke behind my back. With you, I feel like I can finally take that first step. I thought, maybe, if I faltered, you'd gently take my hand and walk with me. That's why I took on this job and chose you as my partner. I was terrified to come here, but I made it. I took that first step, thanks to you being by my side. Hannah's words filled me with a sense of warmth and excitement. But then, I noticed Hannah's downcast expression, and the excitement I had felt moments before quickly faded. This scar. I'd shown it to others before. Especially to men. And when they see it, they start treating me like I'm fragile or damaged. Even if they'd shown interest in me before, they act differently once they know. But you were different. You're the first guy who's ever treated me kindly, even after seeing it. Hannah looked at me with searching eyes. Her cheeks still flushed despite having sobered up. Noticing the blush, my heart began to race again. But it's just your nature, right? You're kind to everyone, so it's not like I'm special to you. Tears began to spill from her eyes. I held my breath. Slowly, I moved closer to her. She didn't push me away, didn't show any sign of resistance as I sat beside her. Her hands were tightly clasped in her lap, so I gently placed my hand over hers. Hannah looked up, startled, as I brushed a kiss against her tear-streaked cheek. I kissed her to scoop away the tears running down her cheeks. That's not true. To me, Hannah, you are special. I want to treat you kindly because you're important to me, and I want to cherish you. As if a dam had broken, tears poured from her eyes. I softly guided her head to rest against my chest, stroking her hair gently. Then, she grabbed onto my pajamas as if clinging to me, and cried like a child. We left the inn just before noon the next day. I thanked the landlady who said, "Please drive safely on your way home," then got into the car and headed back. Hannah, just like on the way there, lightly held onto the hem of my shirt. But this time, it didn't feel like it was out of anxiety. Her expression was much softer now. The silence that filled the car wasn't awkward or uncomfortable. It was peaceful. As I focused on driving carefully, Hannah suddenly spoke. That inn, it was where we were supposed to go when my mom passed away. Ha! I almost turned to look at her, but quickly stopped myself. I could hear her chuckle softly beside me. That's why I didn't want to remember the trip. It's filled with painful memories. But thanks to you, I was able to replace those memories with good ones. Really, thank you. I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye and saw her smiling, her cheeks flushed with warmth. Suppressing the urge to reach out and hug her, I smiled back. No, thank you. I had a great time. On Tuesday, after taking Monday off as a day in lieu, I returned to work. The moment I entered the office, my senior colleagues crowded around me. Hey! How was the trip with Hannah? Got any pictures? Come on, show us. I laughed awkwardly, trying to fend off their questions, when Hannah called out to me. Steve, can you come here for a second? Relieved to escape the grilling from my seniors, I followed her. Hannah chuckled softly. Tough morning, huh? Who do you think is responsible for that? So, what's up? I'm about to go see my dad and report on the inspection. But I'm a little nervous. Could you come with me? Hannah gently took my hand. I nodded without hesitation. When we entered Mr. Adams's office together, he raised an eyebrow in slight surprise. But his expression quickly softened as he looked at Hannah, concern clouding his eyes. Hannah, I heard you went on a site inspection for the tour plan recently. Are you all right? Here's the report. Hannah said in a firm voice, handing him the summary we had prepared. Mr. Adams leafed through the papers briefly. Dad, I made it. I went on the trip, and I'll be fine doing more field work from now on. You don't have to worry about me anymore. When Mr. Adams looked up, his eyes were glistening. He stood up from his chair and immediately pulled Hannah into a tight embrace. I see. You did well, Hannah. I was overprotective, not realizing that you were growing and trying to move forward. I'm sorry. Hannah shook her head in response. After letting her go, Mr. Adams approached me and grasped my hand firmly. It was thanks to you, Steve, that Hannah was able to overcome her trauma. You saved her life, and no matter how much I thank you, it won't be enough. Truly, thank you. No, it's because of her own strength that she's been able to move forward. You're such a good person. I can trust you with Hannah. Maybe one day, you could even take over this company. Oh, Dad. You're getting way ahead of yourself. Flustered, Hannah blushed deeply at Mr. Adams's sudden comment, and with her cheeks puffed out, she playfully hit him. The room filled with bright laughter. As I soaked in the happiness of the moment, I resolved that I, too, needed to take a step forward. That Saturday, I went to visit my brother alone. He lives by himself in an apartment near his old company. But it had a security system, and no one answered when I buzzed the number I remembered. As I stood there confused, a resident approached, so I stepped aside to let them pass. "Excuse me, do you know if someone named Keller used to live in Unit 606? I decided to ask while I had the chance. To my surprise, I was told the apartment was now vacant. He moved out about a month ago. I'm not sure where he went, though." After thanking the resident, I called my parents. As expected, my brother was staying with them. I hurriedly drove to our family home. It was about a 30-minute drive if I took the highway. After greeting my parents briefly, I stood outside my brother's tightly closed room. They say the president found out he'd been blaming his mistakes on his subordinates, and in a fit of anger, forced him to resign. He hasn't come out since. I gently asked my worried mother to step back and call it out, "Keller." There was no response, but I could sense he was there. "Keller, I'm working at a place called Moonlight Travel Agency now." As the name suggests, it's a travel company. And my experience from my previous job has been really helpful. Plus, I met a woman there who I want to cherish for the rest of my life. Things are going really well for me right now. Silence followed. But I continued speaking. "What you did to me hurt me deeply. But I want to move forward, which is why I came here. If you feel any regret for what you did, please open this door. Let's talk, so we can both move on." Again, there was no reply. I waited patiently for my brother to open the door. Then, I heard a soft rustling sound inside, and slowly, the door opened. Keller, looking completely exhausted, appeared. Our eyes met, his face gaunt and worn. In that instant, he collapsed to his knees. "Steve, I'm so sorry. I let my jealousy toward how the president favored you get the better of me, and I treated you terribly. Everyone around me kept comparing us, saying you were the better one, and I couldn't handle it. It started as small acts of resentment, but it escalated. Yet, you never told anyone, not even after you left the company. I don't expect to be forgiven, but if it helps you, I'll apologize as many times as I need to. Please, talk to me. I know I've been a terrible brother, but I still want to be your brother. Like before." Hearing Keller's tearful confession, my heart tightened. "Keller, that's enough apologizing. So let's talk a lot, like we used to." He looked up, nodded, and wiped his tears, then invited me into his room. 6 months have passed since then. Now, I'm driving with Hannah in the passenger seat, carefully navigating the road. By the way, Keller just got a new job. Really? That's wonderful. Hannah was genuinely happy for me, as if it were her own achievement. That made me really happy. "Oh, we're here." Just as she said, the inn we were looking for came into view ahead of us. The spacious parking lot made it easy to park, and I had no trouble getting the car in place. We were here again for another site inspection of a tour plan. This one, like before, was for couples. By now, It had become the norm for Hannah and me to handle all the couple-oriented tour inspections together. Since the release of the Spring Rain-Ins tour plan, our company's reputation had soared, with clients saying, "Moonlight Travel Agency really has the best plans." As a result, we've been getting requests for consultation from inns all over. Thanks to this, what was once a small company had grown so much that Mr. Adams was seriously considering going public. As we got out of the car, the scent of the sea filled the air. This inn was built right by the ocean, its main selling point. It even had a private beach. Hannah stretched out her arms with a satisfied smile. Then, in a playful move, she wrapped her arm around mine. "Let's drop off our bags and head straight to the private beach. And of course, we'll be wearing swimsuits. Hannah, we're here for work, remember? Don't get too carried away." I know. Seeing her genuinely enjoying herself, a smile naturally spread across my face. Everyone carries unseen scars, hidden beneath the surface. Those scars vary from person to person, and that's why you should never dismiss them or belittle someone's pain. You accept the person, scars, and all. And in doing so, healing can begin. Just like how Hannah had managed to overcome her trauma, she could now travel freely and even bare her skin in front of others. Something she once found impossible.